So I have been playing Path of Titans a lot recently, and I gotta say, it's pretty fun. Even though it overlaps with the Isle a lot, there are some features that makes it unique, but most importantly, enjoyable. However, throughout the many hours I dedicated playing the game for the past few weeks, I have been noticing a detrimental pattern between the different mechanics within it that I believe contributes to a lesser experience, is slowly killing the game, and something that the Isle can learn from. And that problem is growth. Growth in Path of Titans works differently from the majority of its competitors. Unlike the Isle or Beast of Bermuda, dinosaurs in Path don't grow with time, they grow with experience. XP can only be acquired through quests, which is a fundamental pillar of Path's gameplay loop. Quests also reward the players with marks, the game's soft currency which can be spent on skins and skills for the dinosaur to use. POT's mechanics are intertwined and connected like a web, which is a major positive when everything works correctly. But the moment one of the game's features heavily worsens the player's experience, it can drag all the other aspects of the game down with it, and sometimes they can even increase the negative impact of each other, and we'll notice that in this video. For a better understanding of the issue this system has, I will now explain in more detail how growth works, as well as some adjacent mechanics. Dinosaurs have 5 distinct phases in this game: hatchling, juvenile, adolescent, subadult, and adult. The hatchling phase is practically skipped by doing the obligatory tutorial every time you create a dinosaur, providing the player with enough XP to leave the tutorial area as a juvenile. You can see your progress in this yellow line above your HP bar. The line is divided into 5 separate smaller bars, and every 5 bars represents a stage. Meaning when you're a juvenile with 4 bars and you complete a 5th, you are now an adolescent with 0 bars, and this process repeats until you reach adulthood. This is important to know, because when the player dies, we don't lose our progress, only half of a minibar and a fixed percentage of the marks we have collected. And dinosaurs don't degrow stages, meaning if you are subadult with 0 bars and you die, you don't go back to adolescent. You still lose marks though. Despite the system sounding good on paper, in practice, growth alone can cause some massive issues that can permanently impact the game to the point of making people quit entirely. And those issues are: the penalty of dying is decidedly more impactful than its competitors. It creates constant pressure to players, and indirectly promotes KOSing, bullying, harassment, and general toxicity. Let's now analyze each one in more detail. At the first glance, comparing the Isle's growth system with Path's is pretty simple. On one you lose everything when you die, the other one you lose a tiny bit. In theory, Path's penalty sounds much milder than its competition, but beneath the surface there are other aspects that makes this comparison much more complex than it seems. The Isle focuses solely on immersion and the pure survival aspect of the game. The player's main goal is to survive, keeping their dinosaurs fed, healthy, paying attention to their surroundings at all times to avoid being killed. So, in a sense, even though you are growing and waiting to reach your full potential, you are, from the very beginning, playing the main experience the Isle wants you to have: the fear and struggle for survival. However, the investment is not equivalent to the amount of time we spend in-game. For the most part, players experience a phenomenon in media called dead screen time, a period of time where either the game loop is slow or stops, or there's not much activity happening in the player's playthrough. Games that have a lot of dead screen time are usually categorized as walking simulators and some other derogatory terms, and the Isle is a good example of that. This in turn makes gameplay possibly boring, but also prevents the players from creating investment towards the dinosaur. Path of Titans has the opposite issue. Since our only method of progression is by completing quests, every point of XP we have is earned through work. Each minibar represents around 6 minutes of continuous growth, if not more, and the majority of quests reward the player with 30 seconds of XP each, and the math is simple. We need to do a shit ton of quests, collect 50 acorns, go here, gather this, clean this lake. All this amount of constant work eventually generates investment. Investment partially lost every time we are killed. Many of us who played unofficial will easily understand that losing half an hour of hard, continuous work is much more frustrating than losing 2 hours of just keeping your dinosaur alive. The quest system is also at fault for a more serious reason. Humans have the most complex brain out of any animal, but even we tend to follow certain patterns and behaviors. There's a phenomenon in psychology nominated obedience to authority, a social influence where an individual acts in response to a direct order from another individual, who is usually an authority figure. Humans enjoy following orders, objectives, tasks. We are goal-driven by nature, so when an authority figure like a video game presents us with objectives to complete, we naturally follow it, and with the added bonus of rewards upon completion, we are even more motivated to do so. The problem here is not moral. Hundreds of games do this one way or another, even the Isle with their diet system to an extent. But humans don't just turn that side of their brains off. If we see quests to be done, we will do them. If more appear, we will continue doing them. The vast majority of players, whenever they see a gathering quest, they won't sit down and say, I will do that quest in a few hours. No, they will immediately go and do them. This creates pressure to the player, continuously doing repetitive quests over and over with no pause in between. This situation is worsened and emphasized even further by the fact that if the player stops doing quests, they don't just keep growing. If they stop, their progress stops, generating the feeling of wasted time, especially if the player enjoys maximizing their efficiency. The end result is players experiencing a stressful process, frenetically and endlessly completing tasks to reach maximum growth instead of naturally enjoying the remaining game mechanics in a slower, calmer pace. The last and most worrying issue the growth system brings is the increasing level of toxicity within the community as a result of such system. But how exactly? The importance of quests remains mostly relevant throughout Dinosaur's growth cycle. Once that is complete, however, players are no longer motivated to do them, especially after spending hours after hours after hours of doing exactly that. At that point, players feel somewhat free to do whatever they want. The issue is, Path of Titans does not promote survival at all. Food and water is abundant, especially if we select forger/scavenger diets, which enable us to eat even more food sources. This inevitably guides players into doing the only other main activity present in the game: combat. With very little motivation for questing and no urgency for survival, players resume to find and hunt other players as a main source of entertainment. This quickly evolves into the formation of KOSing packs that absolutely destroy everything indiscriminately, mostly younger dinosaurs still questing. Juveniles and adolescents are specially targeted. With no way of either escaping or fighting, these starting players are at mercy of the adults that sometimes go as far as sieging younglings, preventing them from completing quests and therefore growing. With such power discrepancy and impact that death has in the game, more malevolent players continuously arrest others, and unfortunately they cannot be easily stopped. Since we don't lose the dinosaur completely after death, KOSers are no longer stopped after being defeated. Let me give you a quick example of this. Let's say there's a KOSing group of 5 generic carnivores, and throughout the map there's in total 14 generic herbivores divided into 4 different groups, 2 groups of 3 and 2 groups of 4. The carni group attacks this group of 4. All herbies are killed, and the carnivores lose 2 members in the fight. In the Isle, if this would happen, the hunting pack would go to the next group with only 3 adult members fighting 3 adult herbivores. Let's say that they also win, but they would lose once again 2 members. In the end, it would be a single carnivore fighting either yet another group of 3 or another group of 4, and he would lose, leaving at best 7 herbivores remaining. Now in Path, this doesn't happen, since they only lose a fraction of their total growth. The carnivore pack would only lose a small percentage of power every time they lose a member. So even if they lose 2 members here, they would just need to regroup and attack this group, keeping 95% of their power intact, repeating the process until they kill all the 14 dinosaurs with minimal XP loss. And this is an optimistic example, since we are assuming everyone is equal in skill, equal in power regarding their dinosaur, and equal in growth, all of them being adults. In reality, what usually happens is groups of apexes just obliterating everything in hotspots like Spine Lizard Lagoon, Grassland Crater, or Corpse Cove. We know the problem. How do we fix it? For that, we need to address the core of the issue, which is the frustration after death, the stress of questing, and the toxicity post-growth. The simplest way to fix this is obviously removing quests and adding passive growth. But that's lazy design. Our objective here is to solve without compromising the systems themselves. The first two can easily be solved with only two things: add passive growth and have fewer quests. Community servers already do the former, and the difference is palpable. Quests no longer feel like an obligatory task, but rather activities that reward the player with growth boosts and currency. But that alone is not enough. The number and frequency of quests are way too high. 2 global quests, 1 local quest, 1 survival quest if you're hungry or thirsty, and up to 2 group quests if you're in a group. That's 6 quests at the same time, and once you finish one, it's immediately replaced by another. To fix that, quests would have to have a much slower pace without decreasing its value. A way to do just that is by adding a quest every 5 minutes or so, but also rewards the player with experience and marks equivalent to 10 current quests. That not only would increase the importance of doing the quests themselves, but it would also relieve the constant pressure players experience, giving them time to enjoy the different aspects the game has to offer without devaluing quests themselves. To prevent increasing toxicity and harassment in-game, the penalty in death needs to be much more severe. However, doing that across the board would hurt younger dinosaurs far more than the adult ones, so that penalty needs to be isolated. An idea is, once you're an adult, the next time you die, you lose 5 times more experience and marks that you originally would. This would bring dinosaurs back almost 3 minibars of experience, decreasing their power just enough to not be as much of a threat to groups of adults like the previous example. By isolating this to only adults, would prevent younger dinosaurs from being overly penalized while also punishing adult KOSers. Obviously, someone dedicated enough wouldn't let this stop them. However, losing half a stage after death could be enough to demotivate most people. Although, of course, the best solution is adding server rules, but that's not possible in official. This is a lesson that the Isle can learn from. Quests in Path serve to give players rudimentary activities to keep players active and also rewarding them for traversing the map, which in turn makes encounters more common. The Isle had a similar issue, however they fixed it in a more immersive way by adding an elaborate diet system. Although it possesses some issues of their own, diets do not face the same detriments quests do, but that doesn't mean they might not have to deal with a similar situation in the future, and if that happens, either with growth, skin unlocks, strains, or any other system containing progression, they already have a case study to consider to avoid mistakes already made in the past. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.